Welcome. For those of you who have not been here before and don't know this group, we are the online community Meetup, and we are a volunteer-run project of TechSoup. You are in TechSoup right now. For those of you who don't know TechSoup, TechSoup is a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits with their technology. So we do that through a number of programs. We're international. Our main program is a product distribution program. So we run the CSR efforts for large tech companies like Microsoft, Cisco, Symantec, Adobe, Intuit, and hundreds of others. And what they do is they offer technology products to nonprofits that we validate as 501c3 nonprofits. And those products are offered to 501c3 nonprofits at about 90 or 95% off of retail. And so that small percentage is our admin fee, and those fees help fund the rest of the organization. So we're a nonprofit social enterprise. And the other parts of the organization include a lot of educational programs, webinars, digital storytelling, and my department, which is focused on apps for social benefit. So I work for Caravan Studios. We're a division of TechSoup. We've been around for 4 years. And Caravan's focus is building products for nonprofits and public good technology. And I've been doing online community and events and partnerships for this organization, for TechSoup, for 18 years. So, joke I said last time, but I started when I was 7. So, as you can see, and this is my daughter and coworker Gigi. And if you guys want to tweet, we would welcome your tweets using the hashtag OCTribe. They'll show up here on the back channel. And also people watching the live stream often ask questions via the back channel as well as on our Facebook Live feed. This presentation will be edited and put up on our YouTube channel. So we have all of our presentations for this meetup's been going for I think 12 years now, and I've been running it the whole time, and I think it's 12, it might be 13 years, but they're all pretty much up on our YouTube channel. So if you're interested, there's a lot of great content there about online community management and social media management and this field in general on if you just look up on YouTube OCTribe. And similarly, you signed up on the Meetup group, so you know about our Meetup group page. We have a Facebook group, which is linked from our Meetup page. A lot of stuff going on. If you have a venue or you want to speak, please contact me. I'm really easy to find because I'm the face on the Meetup page. So you can hit me up about that. I'm going to let some people in the audience make some announcements. So does anybody have jobs to offer?
I do.
Okay, Sue Madigan.
Hi, everybody. I am here from Good Data, just across the way, and we are hunting for a fantastic community content manager. And this is a big data opportunity.
Okay. And does anyone else have a job they want to announce? People in the audience, is anyone looking for work? No, everyone's gainfully employed. Our guy at the front desk, Manny, our volunteer, is looking for work, so talk to him after. And I wanted Michelle from Tectonica to give a little spiel about Tectonica.
Hi, everyone. I'm the founder of Tectonica. My name is Michelle Glauser, and Tectonica is a nonprofit that provides free tech training with living stipends and job placement to local women and non-binary adults with low incomes. And we work by finding tech companies who are hiring and we have them sponsor the apprentices. And then at the end of 6 months of full-time training, the apprentices have a job with the sponsor. So I am looking for more sponsors. So if you have any connections at companies that might be willing to hire junior technical folks, please let me know. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that's it. Does anyone else have any announcements for the larger group? Nope. Okay. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Danielle and Tammy from Leonardo.
Hi, I'm Tammy Specter. On the governing board of Leonardo and the editorial board of Leonardo, and I'm a chemistry professor at the University of San Francisco. And
I think there's another microphone there.
there we go.
Okay, we were just switching mics. Hi, everyone. Thank you guys for coming out. And I just want to, first of all, thank Susan for inviting us here to TechSoup. I've been a big fan of TechSoup for a long time, and especially of Susan, who's really been spearheading the community movement here in San Francisco for quite some time. So very happy to be able to share with all the other experts in the room. My name is Danielle Samantha. I'm the managing director for Leonardo ISAE, which I'll introduce in a minute. I'm also an alter eco artist. What that means is I work on the intersection of art, environment, community, and technology. And today we're talking about balancing between brand and independently run community nodes. And because we have such a small group today, I'd also like to really open it up to where, as we're speaking, feel free to interrupt, ask questions, be curious, ask for clarification. And if I speak in too many acronyms, also say, wait a minute, because our organization is very acronym heavy, and I definitely am going to try to be cautious of that. Okay, so the organization we're here, I'm going to give you a little bit of context of why we're here and who we're representing. So we're with the International Society of Art, Sciences, and Technology, otherwise known as Leonardo. To give you a little sense of what Leonardo does and a little bit about our history, our founder, Frank Molina, was an astrophysicist who was one of the founding members of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He was also one of the original people who founded rocket fuel, and in the 1960s he moved to Paris and opened up a telescope there, and at that time he was a practicing artist in addition to an astrophysicist, and there wasn't a lot of places for artists who were working with science or technology to really have an important dialogue or discussion. And the media at that time was print. So in 1968, or actually it was a little bit earlier than that, around 1966, 67, he went to the Hearst media mogul at the time, whose name was Robert Maxwell, and said, hey, I have the perfect idea of how we're going to bring together artists and scientists and engineers. I want you to publish a journal, and it's going to be called Leonardo. And this is the journal that you see here. This was at a moment in time in the late 1960s where you also saw a lot of big movements, like the movement of new media arts and computer arts and cybernetic serendipity, Nokia, it was now Nokia Bell Labs, but Bell Labs at that time, and IBM. So he was really part of that whole family of thinkers who really wanted to really spend time coming up with brilliant master ideas, and the place where that could be critically discussed was this journal, Leonardo. Fast forward to today. We still do publications. The journal is now in its 50th year. And our publications have really expanded. We are no longer with Bergamot Press as we were originally. We are now with MIT Press, who does all of our publications from Leonardo Journal, Leonardo Music Journal. We have a book series, and we also have some lighter online publications that come out, some monthly, some annually. I encourage you all, if you're interested in this field, to take a look at some of those. We also have a residency program where we bring together artists, scientists, and engineers for 1 month out of the year to live in, I think it's La Honda or Woodside. We have a partner, the Jurassic Resident Artist Program, that works with us on our residency, and we're also expanding that program into different companies and other locations. And then what we're going to talk about today is our Laser Talk series, so I won't touch too much on that. And then we also focus a lot on community. Community is our core. We run on a gift-giving economy, and so everything that we do is with our community members, whether that be at some of our standing conferences that we have partnerships around the world with. We have a program called Leonardo Educator and Art Forum that brings those partners together. But core to what we do is we really are about building a bigger network, a network of networks, or a field of fields, and that's pretty much how we operate. So when I talk about partnerships, we don't do anything by ourselves at all. And everything that we do is with a strategic partner who really helps guide our publications or programs into the future. And this will also sort of lead into how our Laser Talk program has been developed. So these are just a couple of our primary partners, the people that we work with on a daily basis, but we have hundreds of other partners around the world. We work quite internationally. And since we're going into our 50th year, everything that we're doing this year and actually starting from the previous year is we are actually going through a major design thinking process where we've been celebrating all around the world since June of 2017, listening to different communities, whether they be in Uruguay or whether they be in Bologna or New York City or LA or Sao Paulo. We're there listening to our communities who are there celebrating with us and moving us into the next 50 years. So that's a little bit of an overview about Leonardo. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hand this over to Tammy, who's going to go over our reason here for today, which is our core program, the Laser Talks.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about a particular program at Leonardo, or I am going to talk about it for a bit. This program is, as it says, it's called a laser program. It's Leonardo Art Science Evening Rendezvous. Oops, there we go, sorry. And this program was started in 2008 by Piero Scaruffi, who, on behalf of Leonardo, decided that he wanted to have a community program that brought artists, scientists, and technologists together in conversation. And it started in San Francisco, and the very first one was at San Francisco State downtown. And it has now grown into, oh, no, not there yet, sorry. Grown into 30 lasers internationally, and it is still growing. Our most recent ones, just in the last month, are starting in Hong Kong, at Rutgers, and in Rio. So you can see it's growing enormously in the last few years. Our idea with this program, or Piero's idea initially, was to start these conversations across the disciplines from all different perspectives, and to bridge these communities and to support the mission of Leonardo also, which is to bring art, science, and technology together, not just academically, but also just to have people talking across to create solutions and ideas for dealing with the issues of the world that are problematic today, particularly things like climate change and all these different types of things that are coming at us all the time. So I was going to talk a bit about the program that I am the co-host of with Piero in San Francisco. So in the Bay Area, we run 3 programs, one at the University of San Francisco, where I'm an organic chemistry professor. There's another one at Stanford, and until very recently, there was one at Berkeley, which we have suspended temporarily. Oh, and there's one in San Jose, and there's one in Santa Cruz, and there's one at Davis. So there's quite a few in the Bay Area, actually, all independently run. But the one that I co-host is at University of San Francisco. And so that program was created in a very specific format, which was essentially just to bring 4 different people together in these various fields with no thematic at all, just to bring us together and have people talk about their work for a short amount of time. People speak for 20 minutes on whatever their particular focus is in art, science, and technology. And then the next person speaks, and then we have a break and allow people to talk about, to network, and also if there's people in the audience who want to bring things up and talk about things that they're doing. And then 2 more speakers, and then just socializing and networking afterwards. So it's just a way to create this community. That was the very first model that we had. And as you'll see as I go through, it has changed a fair amount in recent years. Oops. Yeah, so go to that one again. So this is the most recent program. I don't know how well you guys can read that, so I'll read a little bit too of who the people were without much detail. So this one was just a few weeks ago at the University of San Francisco. The first person was Deneb Karentz, who is a biologist who works in the Arctic on ozone depletion. And then after that, we had a person who talked about improvisation in jazz and in design thinking. And then we had Mauro Cimino. I'm sure I'm hacking that name incredibly. But nevertheless, you might have heard of him because he's the person who's put all the pianos up and down the coast. And then he also does the piano flowers in the Arboretum in the spring. It's a kind of a big thing in San Francisco. So he's that guy. It was very cool. He came and brought his deconstructed piano and played for us, and it was really amazing. And then the last person was a documentary photographer. So you can get a kind of feel of the kinds of things that we're bringing together, kinds of people that we're bringing together through these events. And then I want to talk a little bit about a more recent program at the University of Augusta. So a lot of the programs are at universities, but not all of them. Some are in galleries. We have a program at the National Academy of Sciences. So they're varied, but a lot of them are at universities. And so the next one at the University of Augusta is a recent program, and in that one very purposely created a program that joins the medical school there and the art school. Thank you. Spaced out there for a second. So, and the art school together. And so it brought these two disparate communities on that campus together, and has been quite successful and exciting for them. Next. There we go. So, as I say, it's this international program now, and we're just going to play a small amount from the National Academy of Sciences program. They call it a DASER there, which is the DC laser. We're just skipping a little. We don't want to play you a long thing.
Artists have to say, the way they present reality, the way they use their imaginations, the way they force us to look differently, to think differently, to hear differently, is really important to understanding how people think, how they make decisions, how they form their values. I think that's part of the spirit of DASER. I mean, we talk about it as art and science, but it's really art, it's science, it's culture, and I think it's also civic values and public policy. We are in Washington.
Yeah, as you can see all these things online, of course. Okay. All right. So what we wanted to actually talk about today, beyond just introducing you to our programs, was to talk about some of the successes and challenges we have had working with this sort of disparate group of communities building these programs, and what has worked and what hasn't worked for us, and what we've learned through that process. The program was started, as I said earlier, in 2008, or if I didn't say that earlier, I should have, by Piero, and it kind of moved along slowly for quite a long time, and then Danielle came on board to Leonardo as the community director, and she changed everything. And so the first thing that she did when she came in was to connect individually with every laser host that was happening at that time, and it was about 10 at that time, I think. Is that correct? 9. Okay, close enough. Okay, and she met with them, asked what their needs were, and informed them that there were going to be new structures put in place to help the program thrive and grow, and to help them serve their audiences better. These involved setting up systems to advertise the events, providing materials for uniform and consistent branding of Leonardo through the events, providing attendee information to help us build our community, and and onboarding all of these people into the systems that she was creating and that were being created by her and basically by her to do all of these things. And so those were all great changes because really there was really very little structure to the program. It was very ad hoc prior to that. And we also created the board laser committee, which I was the chair of. We started an annual laser leadership meeting, which was all the laser hosts coming together in one place to talk about the issues and share our ideas. We implemented 2 international laser internships, one for somebody to help us with media issues and the other for outreach. And what happened was, through that process, the hosts of the lasers started to become evangelists for the program and recruiting new people into starting their programs. And the number of lasers tripled in that amount of time, and we now have 30 lasers worldwide. So it really was a huge change when Danielle came on board into the program.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the technology aspect of this because this was something that was quite new to the laser program. There was no website, there was no logos, there's pretty much nothing out there. There was a little bit of an application process, and then we provided our organizational logo to the laser host, and there was no convening of things. So I will say that prior to me coming on, the last time there was a website redesign was in 2009. So just so you know, Leonardo was actually one of the first 400 websites on the internet. And unfortunately, somewhere down the line, somebody chose the .info as our URL, which we're stuck with. But anyways, so that's just where we're at. So one of the things that became really apparent is that there was just really nowhere to get information. Like you had no idea that where the lasers were hosted, who was hosting them. There was somewhere buried in the 15,000 web pages that we had was where the laser events. That was just incredibly difficult. And Piero Scruffi, who is a writer, actually, he's written lots of books around Silicon Valley in Mandarin and English. He created his own website, which is still out there and is still visited quite often. But it was really important that if we're going to grow this community, we needed to have a place for people to go to, because there was this incredibly fast-growing community, which we did zero outreach for, by the way. We were not ready for 30 organizations. We did not plan for this. We don't have a budget for it. This was done on $0, okay? We have zero money for this entire program. And this program said, no, you need to make this program for us because it's happening whether or not you like it or not. So it was sort of a catching up to the last several years. So we created a new website, and one of the things that we did is we created a page where you could actually see who all the laser chairs and hosts are. You could see a map of the laser host. You can get the guidelines. You can contact the person you need to speak with directly. But most importantly, something we just recently launched that we still need to onboard people, a lot of hosts on, is a laser host portal. So the laser hosts were saying things like they wanted to do their own event management, and they wanted to be able to contact each other, and they wanted to see what other speakers were out there. And that's about it. They didn't really want a forum to go have some dialogue. That we have a Google group for that. We created a Google group that they can use and that goes into their emails. Nobody wanted to sign up for something else, but you know they did need a place to start their lasers. Okay, they did need a place that they can actually do event management, and so we just built them this laser host portal on a CMS system with a CRM, with a content management system and a community relationship management system. It still needs a lot of work. It's definitely bare bones to what we could have. But what we had before this, the year before this, was basically a Google Drive folder with everything in it, logos and templates and sign-up sheets. And so this is our attempt to move off of this Google Drive folder into here, and again, doing this on a budget of $0. Oh, we built it in, our website is built in Drupal with Civvy CRM. So, has anyone ever used Civvy CRM before? Kind of a pain. Yeah, a lot of nonprofits like it. I'm sort of, leading now towards Salesforce, but, no regrets, right? So, we all learn these things as we build stuff. By the way, I have built community platforms before several times, and I will tell you that even if people tell you, well, yeah, we really want a place where we could have all this stuff, it's not that easy. You can't just build it and they will come. You really have to work with people a lot. And I actually, before I got into this role, I'm as director of Leonardo, I spent a decade as a community organizer. And, there's a lot of lessons that you learn about buy-in and relationship building. And, one of the things that we learned is that people hated Eventbrite. Some people did. I would say it was about 50-50. Some people, we tried an Eventbrite page for everyone to use. And some people said, I don't want Eventbrite having my email. Or and then some people said, Eventbrite does not have the right Leonardo branding on it. It has to say Leonardo. And then, so that was an issue, right? So this actually came out of people wanting to have their events on here, and some of them ended up building their own websites, which we link to, and some of them use this platform. But this was important for us. Now, one of the other small, tiny, little, easy, oh, sorry, go ahead.
How many people attend these laser events?
It really varies. Some as small as 30, but some as high as 200. I think the ones that are in Washington, D.C. are 200. The ones at Stanford around 200. So I think on the average is around 50. Yes?
Has all the growth been with immediate spheres of previous hosts?
Sorry.
Is it all like personally? Is this all like direct selling to another host to create a new? Are they all really close relationships, or are hosts coming out as just
No. Part of it is Leonardo's reputation. So it has this 50 years of being an organization that's really well known in this particular little niche, right? And so no, it's totally organic, we'll say it.
We have not outreached to one single one to get them to come. They've been coming.
Come to us.
We don't have, we've actually don't have the capacity. This is part of the things. We need funding for this to really support this in the right way. This came out of, this program built itself before we were ready. So we didn't come up with this program and say, hey, we have this great program. This program built itself and said, hey, we're going to become a program of Leonardo. And at that time, that seemed to be okay as an experiment, but then it got way ahead of itself, and there was nobody in the organization to go in and then sort of figure out how to deal with this, right? Yes. Yeah, my role is funding, but this is not the only thing that I do. This is about 10% of my time. So my role in Leonardo is everything that's not the publication. So it's all the fundraising, it's all the programs, the communications, the development, strategy. But I knew this was important to people. And that's, I mean, my first, to me, no organization should exist unless this community supports it. Right? There's really not a point in creating something just to create it for yourself. You really need to listen to people and see what they need. And this was one of those things that I knew people just really wanted to do this. And it was like every week I talked to somebody who says, I really want to build an art and science community in my place. How do I do that? How do I get started? And this is the best way that I can offer them. And it's been really great ever since we started to, and we'll talk about the hard lessons and compromises we made, because those in effect really actually made it quite a bit stronger than we had come into in this first year that we did this redesign. And one of the things that was such a little tiny thing that meant so much to people is moving the application to be online. It's a very, very simple thing. It was a form. First, we had it in a Google form, of course, because we didn't have the website yet. Now we have it in our regular website form. But what people would do is, like, they would have to write up a whole, like, document and get a letter of support. Now they still need a letter of support because what we do ask is that if they want to become a host, that they follow these minimum guidelines and that they get a support from an institution that's going to make sure that they can sustain themselves for at least a year. And that's worked so far.
So as you can see, the form is very simple, purposely, and it's brought a lot of people in. That there was a sort of gating going on for a long time where people just couldn't get through that process, and this just made it very easy. So that caused part of the incredible proliferation of lasers that we have now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in a positive way. I'm just curious what you're finding, especially as your community grows.
Well, I think that there is one part of the form that does take quite a bit of time, and that's the getting institutional support. And so we have people say, I'm interested in having a laser, and then we respond to them, here's the form, but you have to have a letter of support from your department. And then in that case, then they get together and they think about it and they have a strategy and they organize themselves. And then they come back to us and they say, okay, well, we met with everybody. My dean is ready for this. We're ready for this. When can we get started?
We also have on the board a laser committee, and we review the applications, and we communicate a lot about them before we approve them, to make sure that they seem like they're sustainable, that they're fitting what we want for Leonardo, a whole bunch of things. So it's not just like fill in the form, stamp, you're approved.
Yeah, that committee also was really helpful because it created a vetting system to make sure that that the people were authentic and they were able to do it. Because it's one thing to say, oh, I have this idea, I would love to do this, and then you realize like you don't have the actual support system in place. Because this test takes support, right? Creating these events that Susan's been doing for years, this OCTribe, takes support. There's like 5 people here that are coming together to make this happen. This is similar with the laser talks.
So was this committee something that had always been a standing committee, or this was sort of a
No.
committee that formed responding to the need?
Yes.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the latter. Sure,
okay,
sure.
Yeah,
sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, we'll keep going.
Response from a need. Okay, so I'm going to let
Yeah.
Tammy go on to this.
Okay, so the challenges that we came across as the program was growing was you have to remember all these hosts are volunteers, and so when you are imposing structures onto people who are volunteering their time and saying, here, spend more time doing this thing, there's a lot of resistance. And so basically either they refused or they grudgingly agreed most of the time. Some people welcomed it, but most people pushed back against the sort of we want you to brand in this way. We want you to keep track of who's attending. We want your email lists, all of those types of things that are really useful for an organization to have, but individuals who are running these things on a volunteer basis aren't so happy to attend to. And the very first laser leadership meeting we had at Jurassic, which is down in Woodside, and we had the 9 laser hosts, or approximately that, attending. And it was a very sort of Leonardo top-down experience for the hosts who were attending, and it was a learning experience for us. We were saying, here, we want you to brand this way, and we want you to do this. And we didn't think we were doing that, but they perceived it that way. We also attempted to build a virtual community, sort of from the start after Danielle came on, and that didn't work at all, because what people want to do is come together as a group, and then after the fact, they're happy to have virtual community once they know each other. But I mean, part of this is the people who run the lasers, you know, they're kind of people who are very engaged in this field of art, science, tech. And they want to know each other. They want to meet each other. They know each other's names. They know who each other are out in the world. And it's a community. They want to have community through it. So we had to sort of flip that in order to start to create some virtual community. Another problem we have that is continuing actually is documenting the events. Part of the stuff we've talked about at the laser leadership meetings is how to document them and upload them in some way across the board, these 30 events going on to create a whole sort of laser channel. But people have, since they're volunteering, they have different amounts of funding to do these types of things. And technical expertise and technical help, and it's a very complicated problem. So some are really professionally done, like the ones at the National Academy of Science. You could see that. We at the University of San Francisco, we have students video them, but they're pretty high quality actually, and they edit them for us, and we post those. And we have an aggregator, part of Leonardo, which is called Arteca, which is part of MIT also, and that's sort of art science aggregator where we want to load all these things up, but we're still struggling through that process. And then we also don't have any funding for the hosts. So you can imagine that people burn out or they feel resentful at times that we're asking stuff of them and they're not getting any funding for what they're doing. And we don't have funding for documenting the events or stipends for the speakers. Sometimes individually, different organizations do have those. Like at USF, we have stipends for our speakers who come. But you have to have that from whatever the host institution is or to attend the laser leadership meetings. We had to learn how to do it differently to make it really work, and it has really changed through that process. It was a big learning experience for us to figure out how to really serve the hosts and have them feel supported. So we very clearly dropped this sort of top-down approach of imposing things on, and we allowed for a lot of flexibility in how the lasers are presented, which we didn't used to have. We used to have sort of this model that Piero had initially structured, but then people were like, well, I want to have mine in a cafe, and I want to have more conversation, you know. And so we have one in Berlin that's very, very successful, and it's in a cafe, and they have dinner afterwards with all the people who attend. So it's just very different. Some are very thematic. Some have no theme. It's just completely open. As long as it's art, science, tech, and bringing people together, it works for us. And they sustain, and they do it a number of times a year. So at USF, we do it every other month so that it's just like an event that people know they can come to, and we get a community going. So we're looking for that also. We also had to accept that the hosts were unwilling or unable to track who attended for registration, and accept that the hosts were unwilling to share their email lists most of the time, which is very tricky for us, and that the branding has to happen in a more sort of sideways manner than we anticipated. But it does happen, actually. It's just we had to understand it in a different way. I mean, they are definitely out there advertising their events, and you know, we do provide them with stuff to brand that you can kind of see the colors and the look of the Leonardo stuff, and they use that stuff. But you know, we had to allow for it to happen in a more organic manner and a more sideways manner, rather indirect, rather than here, do this. And they are willing to do it as long as they feel good about what we're doing for them and about what they themselves are doing. And they're very happy to work with us.
Yeah, I will say that the laser leadership meetings also made a huge difference. that last year we did at UCLA, and we did, people came in virtually, video conference, and there was about 15 people in person. And a lot of people at the video conference were like, I'm only going to come in for an hour. And then they were there the whole time, right? Because they got so much out of it. They were really, really engaged with getting to know each other and learn from each other's practices. And we learned some things too, because some people are way less funded than others. And then we talked about funding quite a bit, because everyone wants to talk about money. And it came down to it, they said, well, we just want Leonardo to raise money to support this event. And then they said, don't worry about our event. We'll figure it out. Just support us coming together. And I thought that was it was actually a big weight lifted off of my shoulders, because I was like, oh, I want to give everybody money, but I don't have any money to give. And I thought that was really a good compromise. And then that flexibility, actually, with the evangelizing it. I mean, we get people applying to host that said, oh, I spoke at a laser, I was a laser, I met so-and-so who was a laser host, or the one who's our laser chair right now who's at the National Academy of Sciences. That's a great example of the biggest compromise, because at first I was like, I don't want to call this a dazer, and I'm actually super against calling things something other than lasers, but they were really insistent on calling it a dazer. And this actually happened before I came on. And, but they're the most funded of the laser hosts, and they're the most giving, and then the most evangelizing. So, by allowing us to kind of compromise on that name, what we're getting in return is we're getting the director of the programs for National Academy of Sciences going all over the world, not just the country, all over the world to all the lasers on his own dime, and helping getting those set up. And he was in Rio de Janeiro, Friday, last week, and was in Santa Fe for another one, and they're hosting our laser leadership meeting in the fall. And this was an example of where, as much as I wanted him to, promote the Leonardo brand, he actually was doing that by still directing people back to us, and also really supporting everything that we're doing as an organization. So I do want to sort of talk about that compromise, because visually I think they're so disconnected, but in terms of our culture, they're incredibly connected.
So we have some questions for you on some of the struggles we have, and so we want to know how do we track people, because for fundraising, because there's a lot of people who come to these events, and of course being able to present those numbers is really important for fundraising. Yeah, the thing is we can't get everybody to use Eventbrite. So.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah, they can tell us the
numbers.
We're trying to get them to give us the numbers, but it is not so easy. But yeah.
Yeah, we have to organize it.
Yeah. And then how do we facilitate the capture and documentation and uploading of the lasers, of the videos and stuff? So if any of you have.
So we use Vimeo for the public grant house demo events, and we use YouTube here. Molly actually is the editor of the videos, and we use Facebook Live for the live stream. Is that what you mean?
So we have people who video. It's the issue of, so there seems to be a lot of issues about getting permissions and stuff that I noticed.
Yeah, I think one of our hurdles is because originally we wanted to have a lot of these videos documented in our aggregator. It would still be open access, but a lot of it, because we work with MIT and they want permissions on everything. So getting people to sign off on getting people to give their speakers video waivers and for them to sign off on video waivers, or even just to send us the documentation afterwards. We have a handful that do, and but I would say because that wasn't part of the habit from the beginning. It's sort of an add-on. It's one of the more challenging things to get people to do, is to remind people to get them to give us the documentation so that we can properly share that out with our channels, because we don't because everything is a decentralized communities and nodes. We don't set the dates or choose the speakers or organize the technology, but what we want them to do is we want them to share, basically report back to us with all of this information, so we can actually start to collect all of that together. And that's something we'd love to have your ideas on. Yeah.
So I lead several communities.
So one of the communities I lead is Pi Ladies, and we have a bunch of Google Docs that are shared with all the organizers. And I basically was organizing all of the Pi Ladies events and realized that wasn't really sustainable. So it was kind of similar to your situation, where I got a bunch of organizers and said, all right, I'm going to delegate to all of you. We're going to have a process. And the docs outline exactly what needs to be done and what information needs to be included on each event announcement. And that includes a thing about how if you come to this event, it's likely a photo or video will be taken of you. And if you would not like to be on photos or videos, then you need to let us know. And we give them a sticker, and then they have to sit away from the view of the camera. But as for the speakers, I would just say that's required before they even get started, and just make sure you have a process in place that every single person who's organizing these things knows about, so that they can just blame it on you, right? So they can say, oh, sorry, that's the process.
We have as a radio button, as really quick comment.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Molding and moving and working within each other's rule books. And I think providing information to the hosts so they know the why is much more important than the actual requirement of it. Because you don't want them to necessarily have to say to some artist, if you're not willing to sign off, but if they're going to stand up there and present their art, you're asking them to buck all sorts of other systems that they may not actually be able to. They're union represented, if they have agents, if what they're creating is in collaboration with somebody else, all sorts of things. So when they're having a public discussion, it's just their words, but their persona itself, other people have investment in, and so then signing off and then not knowing where in the world somebody else might pick it up and make a buck off of it, that's a huge concern for them. So I think it's about the sharing of the why, and then also having a check and balance through that. You're supposed to, start the first step of the application, but adding to that the next step, which would be then, what's the verification process that I know? What are those 2 steps? Because you have a committee in place. The person who did the review can be the person who signs off on the release. If this sort of thing gets released, we can add it to the file, we can distribute it. So I would hate to have to deter people who are just
Yeah, but that's a really, you make a good point in that one of the things is that because we are working with people who don't want to share their current research, and scientists especially, I think it's even more so. Yeah, and the artists, but it's true. A lot of these artists are collaborative, and a lot of it is, if they work for a university. So what we ended up doing with the permissions is we work with our permissions person and said, look, we got to make these easier. You got to make these lighter. These got to be permission light. You can't be, so that was helpful.
So what I would say, my experience of hosting is, we just say, is it okay if we video you or not? you know, and some people say yes, some people say no, and so we, you know, turn it on and off, and it's okay. The issue is actually getting the laser hosts to then take those videos and upload them for us. We have this like gap between things getting videoed. Getting
That's
somebody
true.
to do that. Yeah, somebody who can help, somebody who can facilitate it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I agree, because I think it's an issue of time and energy for the hosts, and they're like, you know, I don't want to do this. So they need somebody's going to take care of it for them. Yeah, it's true. So maybe that's what we need is like.
All right, I'm going to put Alex on that one.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
It's not that easy, you know. There's a lot of opinionated. I mean, they've got really justified, you know, responses to this, and some is that when you add a camera, it changes the dynamic, and you know we do have to honor that. So I don't expect it from everyone, to be honest, because I think that if people feel that way, they really feel that way, they're not gonna change their mind with it.
As a body that would kind of regulate itself with champions and laggers.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's interesting because so, you know, we tried to sort of got rid of this top-down approach, as we talked about, but I think that they still look to us for sort of the mechanisms of things, right? And so there's still this sort of quality about it. It's like, well, we don't want you to be top-down, but actually, can you do this part for us and do this part for us? And maybe, you know, giving leadership to some of the laser hosts in a different way who aren't on the board of Leonardo would shift that dynamic. So it's an interesting suggestion.
Perhaps an additional question I'm curious about. So you organize lasers around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see regions? Do you see differences between regions? Mm-hmm. Some regions are more amenable to this, but others they are amenable to something different. I mean, how would you make sense of regional differences?
I think that's been one of the kind of the coolest things, but also a major learning lesson in terms of even platforms and technology. Like for example, like I'm still adapting to the Brazilians because they do everything last minute. Like, were you from originally?
No, I'm from France, but I work with Brazilians.
Oh, yes, it's like the last minute. Like they're so last minute. Right? So it's like they'll be like the morning of, here's my laser stuff, here's the laser announcements. And so what I did for them is that I just basically, I said, here's the Instagram login, and here's we also have a Facebook, community Facebook page where people can post and live stream and everything like that. I said, here's this, here's that. So here, because this is so last minute, you guys keep giving me last minute, you can do it, you know, right then and there. The one that we have in Zurich, which is over more of a meal, that's a lot more laid back. I feel like that's a little bit more kind of Italian style, where it's just sort of like spend hours and hours over food and talking. But then, you know, you go to Washington D.C. and that's the Washington D.C. one is I always use it as a great exemplar because it is the most funded, and they even have a consultant that comes and helps the speakers prep. They have, you know, food and drinks. They've got a huge AV team, and they have like a turnout of about 200 people every time. And so they're extremely organized and thematic and polished. And then you have other ones that are just a lot more raw. We've got one in Tehran now, and that's out of gallery space. That's a little bit smaller. We have another intimate one in New York City that's just incredibly much more intimate. It's just, it's less formal. So I think it really kind of varies region to region. I think something that we always have to do in our organization, because aside from these laser talks, which is in 30 cities, we have 25 international 50th anniversary events. We have had 16 so far. We have another, 9, 10 coming up. And I've been working with people literally in dozens of countries. Like this week, this morning, I was working with people in Uruguay, for example. So, and there, how they send things, and they like to do things with live stream video, but everything's in text. There's no graphics. They send you lots of text, right? China is the same way. China's similar. Like Erica just published, and was it what magazine is the Shuanghui Journal? We just published a bunch of articles in there, and normally our covers are like this: one image, very clean, very simple. But the Shuanghui Journal is just it's design everywhere. So you have to sort of think about what people are going to be in every culture. That's why it doesn't work at all for us to do a top-down branding. The sideways branding is I think the only way to do something on this international scale to make it comfortable for the different communities that we work with.
Yeah, because at some point you need to.
Sorry, people online are asking.
I'm sorry. At some point you need to decide what should remain global, identical for everyone, and probably in your model as little as possible, but at least something, and what should become local so that there's a flavor that people can identify with. And that balance between local and global is tricky, I imagine. Yeah. Because from what you're saying, you have to manage a lot of diversity, and that sounds exhausting. And so having a consensus on what should remain global for everyone and what could be local.
I think that the global part is just making sure that they associate it with Leonardo, and that in some way they use maybe our logos or whatever types of things, and that they communicate that it's a Leonardo event. That's like the minimum thing I think that we want to have happen. Actually, it's pretty minimal.
I'm going to put my development hat on, though, and think down the road a little bit, because you have grown so fast.
Sorry, there's just people on the live stream.
Oh, I'm sorry. I figured my voice was actually through far enough. So I'm putting my development hat on. I'm thinking fundraiser. One of the things that's ultimately in here for all of these folks is the possibility of raising money to support their events, so they can all be like DC or their version of that, right? So the global aspect of it is part of what you're giving them. So it's not top down in terms of dictating the way in which they do it. There is some value to structure and association with you all, because you're the American 501c3. So as you create more opportunities for them to raise money and be associated with you, that actually having some structure to it and some predictability to it will actually strengthen those possibilities for them. So that's just a longer term view of it, of why you might actually want to look at how that might impact the fundraising for everybody.
I think that's very true. I think part of it is that, and this is also sort of a testament to how these our 50th anniversary events have been going. These are also self-hosted. They're all events that other people came to us for, who said that they wanted to do an event, whether it be a celebration or a symposium or a panel at their conference or their city or whatever. And this was also to tie it back to our organization being, because our brand is well known within its niche field, right? So a lot of people are not in this field, but those who are know who we are. So that is critical, and we are very supportive of helping people with fundraising and collaboration and fiscal sponsorship, where people need it. And I think that the reporting is something that we really need to look at to really actually sustain this, because I want us to be able to go out there and say, okay, this is exactly how many people we had, and then be able to raise some money so that we can then, that us raising money for our organization then helps all the rest of the organizations. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
So this may be an obvious question, but you started these events because people asked for them, but what's the biggest value back to Leonardo? What do you get out of it the most?
That's a really good question, and it took me some time to think about that. I don't know, Tammy, do you want to talk about that first, or what?
I think it's about building the community, honestly, and creating community. But I think that I don't know what else to say about it, actually. I think it really is about building the community and maybe bringing something back fiscally, I suppose, to Leonardo, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think in turn for us, I realize this is brand awareness, that this is something that actually has trickled out into all of our other programs and publications. The more people are aware of Leonardo, the more they are interested in publishing with us and subscribing with us, and really bringing us into the dialogue. I mean, I see my responsibility as somebody who's come in to an organization after 50 years, is to really bring us forward into the next 50 years. And part of that is to really build buy-in and care from our community, because if we don't have that, what's the reason for us continuing?
Sorry, do you see something as basic as an uptick in subscriptions? Is there any way you can, I'd use the M word, any way you can measure this at all?
Yeah, we haven't seen an uptick in subscriptions directly from the laser talks, but since they've started to grow, we've doubled our following on Facebook. We've increased our email list by 30%. We've increased our fundraising by 300%. So a lot of that is attributed to really sort of getting it out there. One of the things that I feel we are weaker on, which I want to change, is how do you actually measure that and know how much of that comes from the laser talks or how much it comes from some of these other events. But the more, spreading from 9 to 30 in 2 years is quite a bit. So, I mean, you can say that we are increasing our audience, but we're not seeing it where we can actually identify a line that says, I attended this laser talk to here. But I built our first ever CRM system, Constituent Relationship Management System, if you're not familiar with the acronym. Basically, one of the reasons I did that is I want to be able to tell a story about the Leonardo person. So maybe they came to a laser talk 1 year. The next year they spoke at a laser talk. The next year they submitted an article into Leonardo Journal. The next year they hosted their own laser. The next year they came onto the board. Okay, so that, to me, that is the important part of tracking people, is so that I know that where everyone's journey is, because knowing where people first interact with us and how they move down the road is really critical. And I can tell you that we've had people that I talk to people weekly who've been with us for 30, 40 years. Erica does the same thing. We get people calling us all the time saying, 1982, I published this, and now I'm, want to get re-engaged. And, this is everywhere around the world that I go to, I hear a story. Leonardo changed my life. So I was was it somewhere in Japan, in not Tokyo, what's another big city? Osaka. No, right by Osaka. Okay, it doesn't matter. I was at this Kyoto. I was in Kyoto, and I was at this artist studio who I was super envious of because she had 9 assistants. I was like, Anyways, so I was in her studio. She's a professor at Kyoto. And I said, I'm with Leonardo Journal. And she goes, Leonardo. She pulls open her top drawer, pulls out the journal where she's published it. And this happens to me all the time. I was in Russia in February, and people came and said, oh, Leonardo, I did this with them, I did that with them, I want to subscribe to them, I'm interested in this way and that way. And so I know that we make these impacts, but what I want to do is I want to track that in a way that I can really tell everyone's story. So everyone in this room, you never know where the world's separated by like 2 people. So, I mean, let's talk again in 10 years and maybe you've interacted with us somehow. And I want to know that. That'd be fantastic to hear that story. To me, that's beautiful, and that's why I do it.
I think maybe there's a more pragmatic aspect of it is by creating this massive community all over the world, connected in this way, it helps us actually with other types of fundraising. By having a community that we can actually say, look, we have, 3,000 or 50,000 or whatever amount of people associated with this organization, that helps us as we go and we do to corporations and other nonprofits to partner with and for funding. And so it is very much a community program, but it's a vast and a growing community program. And that's why we want to have the numbers that helps us to communicate that. And it's also incredibly diverse and diversifying quickly.
I know you said your users are against Eventbrite. Have you thought about using like Facebook Live events or Facebook events itself for your meetups?
Yeah, we do have everything on Facebook and Facebook events because we have a community page that people have been using, and some have used it for live streaming. I think they don't want the emails collected, but those who are not using the more apt to use something private and also something that has a Leonardo brand on it than Facebook for those who were not interested in using Eventbrite. Those who are interested in using Eventbrite will go to Facebook and Instagram. It doesn't matter. So I think there's just sort of 2 camps, right? There's the no data camp and then there's the data camp. And I don't know about you guys, but GDRP, that's all I gotta say. GDRP. Oh me. Okay. So that was another issue. It's like that's, I'm sure all of you are dealing with that.
If I may, going back to who are the members of the community, I don't know if you are familiar with the psychological sense of community. It's a research in psychology that was, the foundational paper was about, I think, 25 years ago or something. Macmillan and Chavez wrote that, and they define the sense of belonging to a community with 4 dimensions. The first one is that there's a sense of boundary. I am in and you're out. We use a lingo and the others don't. I have a pin and you don't. That sort of stuff. The boundary. So what you said, I published, I identify somehow with Leonardo because I showed up. That sort of stuff. That speaks to that. The second dimension is the notion that when I am in a community, I have a voice. What I say matters. People agree or don't, but what I say matters. There's this sense of freedom of expression and value of expression. The third is a community should bring value, either solve problems or bring emotional support, but there's a sense of value. There's a reason for which people join. And the fourth is that eventually, belonging in the community, you develop emotional connections. And to me, the reading of that article, which we didn't apply online in the online context, but the reading of that article was a revelation because it helps understand why people join a community, why they stay in a community, why they engage or not. And the reason I was suggesting whether the hosts could be linked together and kind of organized into a subgroup because you may want to think about developing this subgroup to share best practices and eventually convince the laggers that it's good to share and to upload their data and video for the benefit of the entire group. I mean, that that research in psychology brought me a lot of insight as to why people engage in communities. After that, the logistical problems remain important to tackle, but the psychology behind it, I think, is important to understand, at least to try to understand. And the measure of the value can be derived from those 4 rules, I think.
Yeah, so I agree, and so this is why we have these laser hosts come together now in a yearly fashion, and it's really to share best practices and just to know each other. Yeah. But initially we tried to do it sort of virtually. As I said, it didn't work really to do it that way, but bringing people actually together to do that, it really was and has been very successful. And it creates a sense of community, a larger sense of community beyond just Leonardo, which is this big thing, right? We're all laser hosts, and it really, I think, is very powerful to be present at those events.
And you may have a sense of community that is developed in, say, a context of an event in Moscow over time, but you may have a different sense of community that is developed among all of your hosts.
Yep.
But they belong to the overarching Leonardo organization.
Yeah, and I agree that there's the sort of peer pressure aspect of it as you're talking about, which is, well, we do this and we do this, and the best practices, and then the people who aren't on board with that are like, maybe I should do that.
We're social animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a super quick question, which is, and you can just repeat it for the live stream. Do you guys plan to have a centralized online community platform where everybody can interact, all the organizers can interact with each other?
Do we plan to have a centralized platform? I would say that's the laser host portal. Like, we would like to build that out as the space, but it's right now what the tools we're using is a Google group and then that space, but not everybody's been onboarded onto it. So I think it's low priority, to be honest with you. A forum, yeah. I mean, that's what the Google group is mainly what we're using as that forum. But in terms of building something natively, that's sort of where. I would also ask if you could send me that article or the title of it so I can look it up. Yeah.
Anything else?
Number one, I love you guys. I think you're just amazing. And probably how you're approaching, and how you're approaching art and science internationally. I mean, it's a little scary for a lot of us who are used to having a level of control to think about this sideways branding, but I really wanted to commend you doing it. But I do wonder whether if you had something more robust like Slack, that was creating more community involvement, whether you might also gain the benefit of all of these experts, the people who you bring together in person, whether it might help you with some of these other issues if you had something more robust. And I just know Google Groups isn't it. And so I was curious if you thought of something like Slack, for example.
I haven't really thought about Slack just because personally, because of my nerves. But those of you who are in Slack communities, but I'm not opposed to something like that. But I actually think that might be good. I think what we would get is different generational people contributing. We actually have generationally, we have a very diverse group of these laser hosts. We have some. And when I say like against the Eventbrite stuff and the social media, that's one generation, right? And then we have. I don't know really what to assume about that. Well, it's just a generation of people who are really protective of their data. They don't want their data out there. That's what I mean by that. Like they don't want the big companies, their data fearful. Okay, and then there are people who are like. I'll try anything, and then there's some people who are in between. And so the ones that I think on the international scale, what I see is those who are in some of the smaller countries are very quick technology adopters. it was very amazing to be. I was in a new media conference this morning that was all virtual, and it was done via YouTube live. And then, we have these ones that are in, not everybody can get Facebook. You can't get Facebook in China. So, like, do you do this on WeChat or do this on YouTube? So what can people access where they're at? I think that's a big difference. And resources. So I think we'll have a combination of things. I think the only thing that everyone would agree on was an email. That's why the Google group thing worked. Because that's the only thing that we can have consensus on. Otherwise, we have, people like, I'm not doing Facebook, well, I'll do a Google group if I have to. That's what basically. But yeah, so I think that's a good idea, though, at least at minimum, to have something like a Slack or something similar to that, where they can chat that. But I think for me, it's what I hear is like as another thing they have to moderate. But if people were really interested in that, I would be open to making that happen. Yeah.
Like I have a Telegram channel, I have a Discord channel, I have my community was mainly in crypto, so they want to be in those type of channels. So instead of me moderating, what I would do is actually find volunteer moderators to moderate all those channels versus me having to manage all of them and then work with those moderators so that you still have the same, it's still noted, but at least you're going to have some overall, and then if you want, what I found was when you had them in those channels and they trusted you in those channels, you can direct them to the bigger channel, the bigger brand channel. I've gotten people out of Telegram into Facebook, Twitter, or any of the other channels just by inviting them over there.
That's interesting. Yeah. No, let's talk about that. That's interesting.
You want to talk, I found when I talk to people where they're at, then I invite them to the outside channel. That's when they just want someone to invite them personally to go there. They have some sort of personal reference to it. That's my experience.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That's really good advice, actually.
The way I first thought of what I was introduced to social media, that these are different parties. We don't want to miss any of the parties, so we want to bring more people out of the party into your company. So the way I did was I found moderators who were passionate on those channels and had them be my voice in there, so being the voice of all over the people.
Yeah, that's a good point. So looking for those again, like those supporters, those evangelists to help moderate that.
Help you also in your video.
Yeah.
Find people in those communities that are really keen on video. And have them evangelize why they should be doing that content.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I really like that. Yeah. Thank you.
Even more gamified. You have all these international groups. Need some sort of context for the gamify. Which group can produce the best content out of their group?
That's a good idea.
I just have some comments. First, I'd really like to congratulate you on starting offline and that really, leveraging the power of face-to-face community, which, as online community managers, we really forget and beat ourselves up trying to get interaction and engagement and interactivity, and it's going nowhere, and you're posting everything. So I really congratulate you on adopting that and building on face-to-face events. And I think, I've run communities where people have said, do not give me another online presence. I will fly around the world to meet this guy, but I'm not going to send him another email, and I don't want to have an email from it. And I don't want to be on a forum, and I don't want to be online. And I will meet 2, 3, 4 times a year. I will fly wherever you want, but don't make me speak online. I don't need more noise in my life online. So I really congratulate you on that and kind of build on that. And one thing, kind of Olivia and I did at Autodesk, we have annual events there, 10,000 people, annual users conference. And one of the things we try to do is kind of stretch out the event and look at it as a before, during, and after. So the one thing I would recommend is, or suggest that you try is kind of build something up, again, but online, before the event happening to generate some excitement about that and encourage other people to join. During the events, really what you're doing now is really take advantage of all those face-to-face interactions. And then after the event, prolong that experience by online interactivity. And it won't be, a full year of interactivity. You'll have this peak and this trough, but at least you'll extend the value of the isolated experience of the event. If you look at it as a kind of a season for the event of before, during, and after. And often the after leads into the before of the next event.
Yeah, I think that's really true. First of all, thank you very much. I think part of it is that when you say the offline communities, we have this other community called Leonardo Education and Art Forum, stands for LEAF. And that started out as something where people came together at a certain conference, and then it developed into a leadership role where this LEAF community would have this Google group and then meet at conferences in person. I can tell you that we have had rotations of these leaders in there, and they're all brilliant, smart, top of the line type of people, but they can't get people don't want to engage in the Google group. But if you said, we're going to this conference, we're going to CGRAPH, you'll get a room full of people. You say we're going to the College Arts Association, you get a room full of people. If you say we're going to, ISAE, we get a room full of people. And so I think that our community in general, they're willing to talk online to a certain extent, but they love meeting each other in person. I would say that is a very, respective of how they're at. And I agree in the before, during, and after, and it's something we try to encourage on the laser talks. It's something that we do as an organization. We're planning this big event in November for a culmination of our 50th anniversary. After we have 25 international events. It's not a conference and it's not a festival. We're calling it a convening, but all the way leading up to it is everybody who's signing up for this convening is going to be participating in a deep design thinking process. And then once they get there, there's going to be 2 days of intentionality. And then the follow-up will really be about looking at a meta movement and how do we want to actually move forward with that. And it's a really, I say when I talk about the laser talks and I talk about what we do at Leonardo, I always say we just start deep. We don't do the small talk. We're not very good at small talk. We just start right at the deepest level we can get to. And then how do we dig deeper from there? And that's sort of where we've been looking at all these, events that we've been doing and the laser talks. I think it's really important to also have that follow through. I agree with you. So thank you for also bringing that up, and something that we need to design better and help our hosts really be able to achieve that also.
I'll just add one thing to that, to build on you. Again, it's not just the laser talks. If, certain people are going to SIGGRAPH or another event or an art show or whatever, that's a great thing to post. Hey, I'm going to be there. Do you want to get together? And again, the community can come together at different shows. It doesn't have to be at your show. It can be at everybody else's show. But if I think the great thing about you is now what your audience wants. And so you can feed into that and build on it rather than drag them kicking and screaming online and say, talk, post, ask a question.
Yeah, that's so very, very true. Meet them where they're at.
So we're going to wrap the presentation part of this up now, and you guys can network and hang out for a bit. I wanted to thank Tammy and Danielle and Leonardo for presenting. This was really fascinating, super engaged group, small but very, very engaged, which is always great. So thank you. Next month we will be, I don't have a venue yet, but we have a gaming community manager. I'm talking about basically the avid gaming, like rabidly avid gaming community, and managing that kind of community. And I wanted to mention that I forgot to thank our sponsor, Salesforce Community Cloud. So check them out. Very, very cool organization. Obviously, Salesforce is enormous, but the Community Cloud product is really useful for community managers. Thank you so much. And this will be, I'll announce it and tag Danielle, and you're not on Twitter, but I've been tagging USF and Leonardo and Laser Talks when the video's up on YouTube. Thank you all, and feel free to hang out and eat and drink.